Good afternoon, and thank you for staying with us over at AIDSWatch. We have right now a few participants, and the number seems to be increasing. I'm Victoria Rodriguez Roldan. I am the Senior Policy Manager here at AIDS United. And today is my turn to make a fool out of myself in front of a crowd. So it's different with Zoom rather than in person. With that, I will introduce and moderate the incoming panel, which is about HIV and the movement and what's next. This webinar is being interpreted live in American Sign Language. The slide is showing you how to do the chat and pin, and in fact, there should be an interpreter signing very soon, whom you should pin to so that you can see him at all or her at all times. Este seminario está disponible con traducción e interpretación al español. Y para hacerlo, lo que necesitas es oprimir en Interpretation, el botón que parece como un globo, como el planeta, y seleccionar español. Entonces vas a poder escuchar la traducción al español que se va a estar dando en real time. And with that, I would like to move on to introducing our speakers. I will start off. Let's see who goes first in this lineup, and because we have an amazing speaker lineup. And yes, that's me and our speakers, Miranda K, Karmarion, and Ernest. Can we go on to the next slide real quick? If you have questions, please use the Q&A box within Zoom and we will try to get to them. We will be having the speakers start off with introductions of themselves. And with that, I will start off with Miranda K. Miranda K. No, actually, we start off with Linda Goler. Blount. I'm sorry. We have an initial speaking before her. No, she's at the end. I'm sorry. We're having some technical issues. Can we go back to the previous slides of the panel? Thank you. I'm going to start off introducing Miranda Kigiwa Nayu. And I sincerely hope I'm pronouncing that right. If not, I should be corrected. She is a disabled woman of color, educator, writer, public speaker, parent, and global advocate, a proactive and resourceful individual in a multicultural, neurodiverse, different family. Miranda K, who is an American born to immigrant parents and whose undergraduate and graduate degrees are in international relations and education, is passionate about human rights, justice, and inclusion. She is involved in various social justice activism endeavors, including HIV-related advocacy, disability rights, learning via technology, research, gender, and racial equity. A prolific writer, Miranda K has written for and/or been featured in numerous blogs, abstracts, magazines, books, and other platforms, often drawing from her personal experiences as a late diagnosed autistic adult woman, a person of color, an autistic parent of autistic, non-autistic children, and a survivor of intimate partner violence. In addition to writing, she is one of the editors of a groundbreaking anthology on autism and race, and a co-coordinator of the Fund for Community Reparations for Autistic People of Colors, Interdependent Survival and Empowerment. She has been an invited speaker at the White House, at the United Nations headquarters, and a keynote speaker and or presenter at numerous peer-reviewed advocacy, education, and disability and research conferences. She has been the recipient of numerous awards, including the Advocating for Another Health Activist of the Year WeGo Health Award of 2014 and Service to the Self-Advocacy Movement 2015 Award by the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. Currently balancing her roles as a faculty member at a state college and as a doctoral student in an educational leadership program, Miranda K considers herself a lifelong learner who is constantly growing, changing, and hopefully for the better. She considers her wonderful children to be her greatest accomplishment. And with that, Miranda K, please, we've shared spaces before, but go for it.
Hi, everyone. So I had my camera on for a few minutes and was smiling at you all, but I'm going to have it off the rest of the time. But just really want to thank you for being here. And wow, we're at the end of AIDSWatch. And I remember some years ago, my first time virtually attending AIDSWatch, and how much I learned, and how much I gained from what people shared and their experiences. And it's just really humbling to be here to talk about, this holistically, to talk about the movement, to talk about ourselves, to talk about all of these different things that intermingle. And so I like to script a lot and quote things. And so I'm going to start off with something that we all know and we all talk about, but that doesn't mean we do it. And that's self-care. It's something we know we're supposed to drink a certain amount of water, get a certain amount of exercise. We are all dedicated. This is important to all of us for various reasons. Some of us are living with HIV. Some of us love people who are living with HIV. Some of us just care about our fellow human. And so Audre Lorde talked about the fact that caring for oneself is not indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. So when, I think about all of the different things that have been talked about over the past couple of days, all of the issues regarding gender and race and criminalization and, the administration that we are, are currently, facing and all of these things, and how these things intersect across so many different movements. For most people in the HIV community, it's never been just HIV. It's always been HIV plus whatever. And so I think that when we look at people needing to have their spaces or needing to be heard, okay, start my video. Oh my, okay, I'll start it. Look at people needing to be heard or needing to be seen or needing to have their spaces. I think one thing that we all need to ask ourselves is, what are we doing in terms of the larger human rights and social justice movement to advance the lives of the HIV community? What are we doing in these spaces, in places where we have influence, in places where we have connections or we have understanding? Are we connecting issues related to substance use or mental health? Are we talking about disenfranchisement? And, are we talking about reproductive justice and economic justice? Does HIV come up, or is HIV only when we're in our HIV box? Because if that's the case, we're never going to get to justice because these movements have always been intertwined. I'm going to read a quote from Fannie Lou Hamer that I love, and paraphrasing it. Is this America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, where our lives are threatened daily because we want to live as decent human beings in America? I think a lot of us can say, heck yeah, that's America. That's the America that we know. That's the America that we've experienced and that we've lived. And so essentially, I just want us to really kind of step back and think. And, my other panelists are going to share some really great things, and we're hoping to make this really conversational, which is why we don't have slides. And I just want to share something that I wrote when I was thinking about this whole concept of what's next? What do we do? What do we transform? What have we done well? And what are we sucking at? And so I'm thinking about it in the context of the coronavirus, because there have been so many things over these last 7 months with the coronavirus. There have been so many parallels to HIV, as I know other people have shared, with the terminology, with the tracing, the stigmatizing of people, the misinformation, fear-mongering, and so many things. And so there's a lot that we can learn from has happened over the last several decades, but we're going to have to do some things a little bit differently. And so I just want to read this to you all, just kind of like some thoughts that I had about everything, and basically by the time I share this with you all, over 7 months will have passed since, for most of us, the world as we knew it changed dramatically. It's difficult to imagine a year that has been as frustratingly obscure as this one. 2020 has certainly defied the so-called visual acuity its very name implies. And yet we're still here on the road to resilience. Battered, yes, more than a little weary, but we have survived this far and are even becoming more proficient at navigating life in what many seem to like to call the new normal. I am constantly amazed at the resiliency of our community and its demonstration of the human spirit, especially now. The HIV community has endured enormous devastation, loss, trauma, and discrimination. Nothing can compensate for that, nothing. At the same time, a phoenix can only emerge from the smoldering ashes from whence their predecessor met its fiery demise. Life as we once knew it is ablaze. It remains to be seen whether we, like the mythical firebird, will emerge anew and soar into clear skies, bringing all of us together, or whether we will instead scorch our fingers, stubbornly trying to salvage the way things were amidst the flames, and continuing to ingest toxic plumes of smoke each moment we linger in the past. Right now, we seem equally posed between two different paths, and that's both people living with HIV and allies. Our paths are the past and the future. The time has come. We have to select one of these paths and we have to commit to it. And it's going to be hard. It means we're going to have to yield our privilege. It means we're going to have to lift up people. It means people are going to have to get out of the way. It means we're going to have to spend money. It means we're going to have difficult conversations. It means we're going to have to learn and grow. It means we're going to have to bring those people who don't have the access to the platforms that we have forth. But if we choose not to, then life will make that choice for us. And that choice is not going to be one that we are enamored with. If you were to query the average person now in 2020 about HIV, about how they feel about people living with HIV, about equal rights, it's pretty evident that everybody knows what they're supposed to say. They know what the socially acceptable response is, how we're supposed to embrace everyone, how serostatus is not a problem, about how racial and gender issues, immigration issues, all of these things shouldn't be something that the most marginalized of our community faces on a daily basis. And yet actions show us otherwise. Policies show us otherwise. Media shows us otherwise. Our very own colleagues, friends, family show us otherwise. And so it's time for us now to demand that regardless of limited spoons, limited resources, limited knowledge, it's time for people to crap or get off the pot. Being diplomatic, trying to go with the lesser of two evils, yielding, waiting our turn, that got us the administration that we have right now. That got us a lot of the losses of the gains that had been made over the years, people's blood, sweat, and tears. That got us redundancy and stagnation. And we're done with that. When you're on a road, you're supposed to travel, you're supposed to progress, you're supposed to grow. And so through all of the different things that we go through, our different opinions, our different ideas, our different experiences, it remains that we still deserve the basic human dignity of justice, of autonomy, of respect, of love. People are not numbers. People are not viruses. People are not cases. People are not infections. And there's nothing more important than shoring up our brothers, sisters, siblings in the HIV community and doing whatever it takes to make things right and make things different from what they are. Because we're moving backward and it's time to stop. On this road, we need to move forward toward our resiliency, understanding that we don't have all the answers, understanding that we're going to have to learn as we go, understanding that we're going to have to apologize, and understanding that as we bumble and make errors, the generation behind us will benefit and grow from what we've learned. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda, for that. Bravo, wonderful. I'm seeing the comments and you seem to be popular, which is always the case because you're amazing. Next up in the lineup is Karmarion B Anderson. Pronouns are she, her. She's the Alabama State Director at the Human Rights Campaign. Last time we met, we were sharing a panel right when she had started at the American Federation of Teachers in Montgomery, Alabama, at a conference that we were doing in civil and human rights. Karmarion becomes the first trans person of color to serve in a leadership role with HRC in the organization's history. She was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, with family roots in Natchez, Mississippi. Before joining HRC, Karmarion worked in the field of public health and education, managing both local and national prevention initiatives, focusing on HIV/AIDS and other health disparities that impact marginalized communities. Karmarion also brings with her a wealth of experience in faith spaces, currently serving as the National Co-Minister and South Region Coordinator for Trans Saints Ministry of TFAM, the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. In addition to this role, Karmarion previously served for 15 years as an associate minister at the Living Faith Covenant Church in Dallas, Texas. Karmarion is the founder and former executive director of Black Trans Women, a national nonprofit 501c3 organization with a mission to uplift the voices, hearts, and souls of Black trans women. With all that awesomeness then, go for it.
Thank you so much. And what an awesome opportunity it is to be a participant as a panelist in this wonderful conversation that we're having. And I would like to say that I've been around for a while, so let me just be me. I think virtual has allowed us just to be ourselves. And so some new addition is that not only have I worked in public health and very still passionate about it, and now working for HRC in Alabama, I have recently got married, so I'm also a wife. I can add to that. I am still a mother. I have 4 bonus stepsons, and I have some grandchildren. So all of this I bring up because when we speak about movement, at times for a person in my caliber, a Black woman of trans experience, let me let that soak in, because language is important of empowering those that we are connecting with. My trans has nothing to do with who I am as a human being. And so therefore, when we speak about HIV in the movement and what's next, a couple of things come to mind. Is first unpacking how are we defining movement? And I've been, like I said, I've been around a long time, and movement is something that go forward. We're progressing. We're moving from point A to point B, and in some cases, all the way from A to Z when we get very excited about initiatives and we have not really done any legwork or any formative work. We haven't really, seen if we left anybody out of the equation. And so to speak as in regards to the trans-identified community and the GNC community, or the gender nonconforming community, it's important for us to be able to understand how we're defining movement, because I guarantee you that demographics of my community, at times we don't see movement at all. And then when we try to incorporate health disparities such as HIV, we may not see HIV as a movement in our community, because there are so many other priorities for us just to survive, so much priority just to protect us when we leave our place of establishment, wherever our 4 walls are at, or wherever we lay our heads at. And so oftentimes I can get a little challenged with the word movement, versus today we're speaking about awakening moment, to better understand how we're able to take the work that we have done so religiously in public health and how we can actually call all demographics to a place where we can move together. I feel like I'm preaching a little bit, and that's my background, and I very much enjoy it. But it's important we unpack that, because words means everything. Words also allows us to know if we are invited into an initiative. And so HIV in the movement, or as I would like to say, this awakening moment, is really for us to do an audit to ensure that the movement has every demographics, including the trans-identified and GNC community. If you don't have staff members that represents that demographic population of the trans or GNC community, I'm not sure if that's a movement. Okay, I'm not sure if your cultural competency has not translated to cultural humility that leads to cultural responsiveness. I'm not sure so much HIV and the movement, if that's really a movement. Enough about that. I will say one last thing. Defining movement in HIV movement, you know, a lot of times our initiatives really focus on what we have called social determinants of health. And I know everybody knows what that is. You know, we write grants behind it. That's how we get our money. That's how we understand what our demographic population is in order to target, which is not a word that's conducive to every demographics. If anything, that's very much harmful. It's an attack, especially on someone who has to watch their back every time they leave their compound. At the same time, a movement will say that we start looking through a lenses of understanding that it's not just social determinants of health, but it's social determinants of reality. COVID is teaching us that. The reality of COVID snuck up on us all, and it's not dividing populations. It is hurting each population. But at the same time, we're speaking about HIV. So what's next? What's next? How do we have this awakening movement to really focus in on the the awakening moment as we focus in on the HIV in the movement and talk about what's next? Well, this is my wish list on how we can progress and move together and understand what's next in all of our agencies. If that's an AIDS service organization, community-based organization, FQHC, all of that, anyone that has a hand on reducing HIV in this movement we're calling to make sure that it's inclusive and equality for everyone and equitable for everyone. Couple things is that in the HIV epidemic, we're all doing reporting. Hope your report has those demographics that have been left out for so long to include them in order to be part of the movement. Always, if you had a blueprint as it relates to the trans-identified community, then therefore start there to unravel what else is missing out of that demographic section where we're speaking about HIV in the movement, ending HIV, and then what's next. In addition, policy efforts. We need more institutions, public health institutions being readily involved in policy change from the legislative level all the way up to even election, because our faith, our being, our health is in the hands of how we are changing some of these policies that's really not really centered around or matching what we're writing as our demographic population, how we're going to spend the money, how we're going to increase the awareness of HIV to reduce the stigma and so forth. Policy has a big piece in that. I also want to encourage us that intersectionality of who we are is very important. I like to define intersectionality, not just, you know, I'm Black as a race, I'm a woman of trans experience. In addition, you know, I'm a mother. I can cook very well, Southern roots, grease and butter at the same time. Y'all know something about that, I'm sure. But at the same time, when intersectionality shows up in connection, you will always know that you see the person that's in front of you or around you, because you'll be able to see yourself. You're the best person that can define who you are in order for that empathy to increase, to make sure that you are respecting that individual. I believe that's how we should look at how we are looking at the work or the movement towards HIV and reducing it in our jurisdictions. Trans-identified individuals in GNC, we're not laboratory white rats with red eyes. We're not your numbers. You know, we're bringing in you some money, but we should not be used as money, you know, getting our data and taking the experiment advantage of who we are when there's nothing sustainable about that. So my wish for this particular topic as we move on is HIV in the movement is really, let's have an awakening moment. And what's next is found in the quote. Since we start off with the quote, this is one of my favorite quotes, and it's not found in the King James Christian Bible. It's really about, from a martial artist called Bruce Lee. I absolutely love action movies. And Bruce Lee once said, knowing is not enough. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do. There is more work for us to do in this movement that we're defining in order to see what's next. We can all have a wish list. We can all have wonderful ideas, but until we start putting some actions to it, then there'll be no production and no productivity of an outcome to reduce HIV in hard to reach places, for instance, the trans and GNC community. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Karmarion has the speaking skills that are unique to a preacher, basically, that only a preacher could have. She gets fire pumping in your veins when she talks. So with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Ernest Hopkins. Ernest leads the San Francisco AIDS Foundation national policy and legislative activities at the federal, administrative, and congressional levels, seeking appropriate levels of resources and sound health policies that promote the health and wellness of San Franciscans living with and at risk of HIV. Ernest marked 20 years at San Francisco AIDS Foundation in 2017, having led federal policy and legislative activities since 1997. Prior to joining SFAF, Ernest was the Director of Health and Treatment at the National Association for People with AIDS, NAPWA, in Washington, D.C., where he led clinical trial review and consultation at the inception of HIV antiretroviral treatment and availability, advocating for safety, effectiveness, and affordability. Ernest leads and has led national advocacy coalitions like the National Black Gay Men's Advocacy Coalition and the Communities Advocating Emergency AIDS Relief, CARE. He has testified before congressional committees and advised Congress and legislative initiatives, earning him the Congressional Black Caucus Leadership Award. With that, I give it up to you.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you very much. And thank you, AIDSWatch, for participation in this incredibly important event. All these years of working in HIV, AIDSWatch has always been an incredibly important component of our work. And so I really thank all of you for participating. And I think I'm at a deficit because after Morenike and Karmarion, I'm not a preacher. That's not my ministry. But I have been around a long time. And what I would say about what's next is more of what we have experienced in the past. I think our past is prologue. I was around at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. I remember sex before HIV. So that tells you how old I am. And I was an advocate at the time. And I can recall thinking that HIV was terrible. And it was something that we were just going to push through. The government was acting crazy and not doing what they were supposed to do, but the community was going to push them and force them to act right and to get things done. That was 1980. That was 1981, excuse me. We didn't expect to be here this long, fighting for appropriate treatment access for all, a vaccine, a cure. And I say that as a cautionary tale to where we are now. We're in the midst of multiple epidemics. We're in an epidemic of HIV. We're in an epidemic of COVID-19. We're in an epidemic of social inequity based on race and class and social inequality. These are all happening at the same time, and they're all happening in many of the same ways that they did in the 80s. And so I say that as a cautionary tale When our president says that we're going to have a vaccine and everyone is going to be fine in a month from now, remember your history. Don't fall for the hype. Understand the importance of sticking around and learning from the past. The HIV community is one of the best things that could possibly be available to us right now. Thank God for all of you. Thank God for the HIV community, because it is the learning, it is the fighting, it is the experience that we have built and the knowledge that we have learned over these years that's going to get us through these terrible times. It's tough out there. But as a person in the HIV community, what I would say is we have it better than most because we have fought for our place at the funding table. We have fought for our place at the policy table. We have community-based organizations that are funded directly. We have line items in the budget. Not very many disease-specific institutions and organizations can say that outside of the HIV community. So think about it and be proud of the work that's been done and commit yourselves to continuing with that work to move forward. The HIV Vaccine Trials Network at the National Institute of Allergic and Infectious Diseases is the exact same network that's now being used for clinical trials on COVID-19. The work that we have done as community advocates to make sure that those clinical trials were responsive, transparent, community-driven, diverse, responsive to the needs of the participants so that it wouldn't just be about getting the drug, but it would be about making sure that the people who were involved in those trials were respected and that their needs were taken care of. All of that is because of the HIV advocacy community. Don't forget that. Don't let people tell you otherwise. When we are able to contribute to COVID, we are making a contribution to the world. Think about it in those terms. Think about the importance of your work. Don't ever minimize what it is that you do. Don't ever minimize the importance of your story and your ability to tell it to your congressperson or your senator or their staff people. It makes all the difference in the world. We have changed the world and we will continue to change the world. Don't forget that. Don't let go of that power. And in a moment like this, as we're closing AIDSWatch and we're reflecting on the second year of it being a virtual engagement with each other, we have to understand that the nimbleness and the flexibility and the creativity that we bring to our advocacy now is just a part of the job. No, we're not gathering in thousands and we're not marching on the Hill in the same ways that we did. But take a lesson from our brethren in the streets, in the Black Lives Matter movement, in the defund the police movement. There are still ways to get ourselves together when necessary to tell this government and to tell this society, enough is enough. You're not doing it properly. We have a different vision for the future. Our young people are amazing. The things that are happening in this community, in these streets, are amazing. Creativity is exploding from the HIV community. There's so many wonderful HIV advocates who are now becoming parents. I heard Karmarion, congratulations, my dear. I didn't know you had become a wife. That is so fantastic. And I have mentees who are adopting children. I mean, there's a lot going on to be excited and proud about in this community. It's not just about the struggle, it's also about the love. It's also about the community bonding that we do with one another. It's also about the purpose that we bring to our work to make sure that everyone has access to what they need. That this is a country that treats healthcare shamelessly. And it's time for us to do away with the systems of the old and bring in systems of the new, where everyone has what they need, regardless of the cost of it, and that people are treated with respect when they come in to get what they need without question of payment, and that we're able to live healthy, well lives in freedom and justice, equal justice for everyone. That's what we're about. That's what we have to be about. That's what we have to demand. We have to demand it from everyone that we encounter. They won't give it to us unless we tell them to give it to us, unless they know they have to give it to us. And soon, many of you will become elected officials, and it won't be about them giving it to us. It'll be about you making sure that we have what we need. Because let's be very clear that part of forward movement is shifting the paradigm so that those of us who know exactly what needs to be done are actually policymakers to do what needs to be done. So don't limit yourselves and your expectations of the future. You can be the people who fund programs for health and wellness. You can be the people who run agencies and departments of government to serve the American people. It's your destiny. So think about things in that way, and know that while I believe that there are many, many wonderful aspects of these remote gatherings that should be brought into the future, that I crave being able to say hello to you and hug you and enjoy your company. And I hope that we will be back there very soon. But until we are, the work continues, the fight continues, the creativity continues. We have work to do. And I'm so excited that we'll be doing it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. So with this amazing lineup of speakers, we still have a little bit of time. We have till around, according to the round show, till I would say 6:13. With that, I would like to start the Q&A section since we're literally ahead of time. One of the questions, one of the comments is from an account for ACT UP Philadelphia. Hello there, Philadelphia is one of my favorite cities. If we lose access to HIV medications as Black and Brown people, it will be genocide for the larger community after people become infectious and able to transmit HIV. So I would say, considering this comes in the context, and that's why I'm reading it aloud, is that, for example, the Affordable Care Act, which guarantees medication, which guarantees treatment for insurance and coverage despite pre-existing conditions. So if you have HIV and you get a new insurance, that is still covered. Or for that matter, the fact that Medicaid is right now one of the largest insurers for people living with HIV, and states are trying to cut Medicaid, and we're seeing attempts at caps and so on. And again, the Affordable Care Act is under attack at the Supreme Court, which, you know. So with that, I want to know what comments do our panelists have? So we can start off with whoever is feeling like starting to talk first.
Victoria, I'm looking in the Q&A. Are we answering those questions?
Yeah, Yes, that question came from the Q&A I'm seeing. So keep in mind that there's a few questions from the prior panel that I just can't get rid of. So start off from 5:32 p.m. onward.
Oh, okay, sorry. The first question I see is about new California law working that allows pharmacists to dispense PrEP without a doctor's prescription. And my understanding is that that law has not fully become operational yet. So it's a fantastic advancement because we don't want the need for a doctor's visit to be a barrier to access to PrEP. And we work very hard to get it passed, but I don't think it's operational yet. I'll check, and before we're over, I can give you the answer of when we're going to be live with that.
So with that, I would ask panelists to comment on the next question we have, which is what's the planning process? So think about it, even if you don't have specific plans or can't speak for your organization, and then around what would you tell people to do, since we're thinking of moving forward in this panel, around whether Trump's wins, seizes power, etc. So we are obviously a nonpartisan organization and we don't endorse candidates, but I would encourage thinking of what do you recommend people do regarding the election?
I can just speak for the San Francisco AIDS Foundation. So we obviously are not partisan either, but we want to make sure that our community is educated. And so we are about the business of making sure that they know all of the opportunities to vote for progressive ballot measures and individuals that have like-minded perspectives that move the ability of people with HIV and those at risk for HIV and those using drugs to lead healthy and productive lives. And so there are a number of initiatives in California to that end. We are making sure that people are supported by filling out their registration and filling out their ballots and taking them to our city hall, which is a large place where everyone can go and drop their ballots off. So those are things that the AIDS Foundation is making sure that we're providing as a service, not just to clients of the foundation, but also individuals in our community, because our organization is located in the Tenderloin and we have relationships with many people in the community. And so we'll be supporting them with that kind of support during the election and prior to the election, running up to it.
And I would just add to that what Ernest is stating. We're in a pivotal time of this election. And I work for HRC, so everyone knows that we seek out equality candidates. And we did endorse the Democratic candidates, Biden and Harris. And so that's no secret. But for the sake of being partisan, I think it's important that a couple of things, that we don't focus too much as it relates to the win without focusing on us doing the work to ensure that our voices are being counted. Right now, we have an opportunity in pretty much every state, and because of the blessing of COVID, and I say that not because of the death that we've experienced, because that's horrific, but because they have changed some of the ways that we're able to cast our vote. Absentee voting is at the most high right now. You can submit your absentee voting now, and you can go to your state website. You can order that ballot and you can get it in the mail so your voice will be counted. And I think that's important. The traditional ways of us voting, we can seize this opportunity in this moment of focusing on absentee voting. And if you're not able to absentee vote, then I need for you to ensure that you are prepared to vote on November the 3rd. make sure that all your information is up to date. You understand what I'm saying. But now let's talk about if Trump does win, okay? And we have experienced this when, Trump became president in the last election. And let me speak from what I've seen, maybe in my own I statement, or being a Southern belle, a Southern girl, being in the, in the Southern states. We can't give up. When I hear language such as, well, your president or not my president, and I get that, but we can't give up, because when we start having that love of attitude, then we stop showing up, holding the powers to be accountable. We stop focusing on news. We stop engaging in things that we have as a right of being a citizen of this United States. And our voice, even when they're in office, still counts. And we have to be in position to still combat that in every hand. So I am not looking personally for Trump to win. But if Trump does win, that's where extended grace from my Christian background. The heart of the king belongs, to the divine. And I have to keep saying that, but I will continue to do my part to advocate, continue to do my part to show up and try to change the policies that are necessary, to try to change some of the red into blue that's more in favor to equality. And remember, when we're speaking about our HIV constituents, they're going to fall on the margins. They're the red is not, blood is red. But HIV right now is really centered around the candidates of, I believe, Biden and Harris, who are really taking a closer look at public health initiatives. But we have to change our mindset. And yes, there will be some disappointment if President Trump becomes reelected. But we're going to have to get on the battleground. We're going to have to stay focused. We have to continue our Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to have to continue the Trans Lives Matter movement. We got to create a public health lives matter movement. We have to do so much, because after a while, after the next 4 years or whatnot, then who to say that we won't get someone else that's like Trump, So this is our opportunity to share our voice, to go out and get voted, get as much information, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever you got to do. We have the power to help change an environment as it relates to educating them about the candidates. And you know what to do, and while we're scrolling through Facebook or scrolling through Instagram and we're laughing and sharing posts, share your thoughts about the election. Let us seize the moment to make sure that we get that equality candidates needed, that we feel that it's going to be fair and just to all of our intersectionalities, because we're doing overtime in this current administration. We're doing overtime. And I don't know about you, but I personally am very much tired. But the work must continue, and we must keep the faith.
I wanted to chime in. What Ernest and my sister have said is just really, amazing. But just to add a little bit to it, so thinking about, so myself as, a disabled woman of color, and thinking about a lot of disenfranchisement that so many aspects of our communities have faced through the years. So does your ID not match this or that? Are you going to be given difficulty when you come to vote? Do you not have, you can use a rifle or gun registration card, but not some of the other types of identification? Are the polling places accessible? There's just so many barriers that are already put in place. It's very clear that they're afraid of our votes. They're afraid of our voices. They're afraid of our power. They're afraid of what can happen when we get together. That said, I too am in a Southern state. I am in a sea of red. But despite that, I'm going to be out there voting like nobody's business, and so are my two older children who are just old enough to vote now. They're so happy that this is the time that they're going to cast their first presidential vote. And hey, every vote counts. So when I think about the things that people do to support, I think about groups like, Positive Women's Network, in terms of the policy and educating the community, and all of these other, groups that are doing things to share with others, to educate others, to have people have some sense of hope or encouragement. It's our right. It's our responsibility to get in there and make our voices heard. It's because of that apathy that we often have, oh, it's not going to make a difference, or it doesn't matter, or it's all rigged. Some of that is why we have who's in the White House today. So regardless of your circumstances, even though, again, I'm swimming in a sea of red, red is the shirt I'm wearing, I'm going to be out there voting. And I hope you will too.
Amen. Because let's don't get caught up in just the federal elections. We have seen our brothers and sisters in the streets protesting George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And let's remember that the Breonna Taylor verdict most recently is at the hands of Daniel Cameron, a state attorney general, which is an elected position. So when you go out to vote, you're not just voting for the president, you're voting for the governor, you're voting for the attorney general, you're voting for your city council, you're voting for your congressperson, your senator, you're voting, there's a lot of votes that you are casting when you go to vote on November 3rd. Don't get focused on the president. The president, ironically, in a very twisted way, has been very good to the HIV community, while intersectionally, he's been horrible to the people living with HIV. You can't be good to the HIV community and say, I'm going to end HIV and I'm going to give you more money, when you discriminate against trans people living with HIV and trying to have access to programs that are funded by HHS. You can't be good to the HIV community when you discriminate against people of trans experience who are trying to get an education or who are trying to be in the military. So it's a push me, pull you kind of experience at the federal level. But at the state level, please don't forget that you have the ability to change the laws and the budgets of the police. That is a local budget. That is a budget that's controlled by mayors and city councils and boards of supervisors. So when you go out to vote, you have a lot to think about. And I would argue, think less about the presidential vote, because that's the easiest vote you're going to take. If you don't know who you are going to vote for president yet, you've been sleeping and you need to wake up. It's all these other votes that you need to pay attention to. So please don't take the okie doke and forget all of the very important decisions that are there for you to make on November 3rd.
So with that, since we've been talking about the vote, I'm gonna take moderator privilege. We still have like a few minutes to go. So I'm going to ask basically, what do you feel are right now as we move forward, as we look into the future? We're like 34 days away from a presidential election. Lord knows what's gonna happen, and so on. So I wonder, what do you believe are the priorities of this movement as we try to be intersectional and move forward for an HIV movement that includes everyone? So yeah.
It's interesting. Many movements, parts of the movement regionally have already begun to have intersectional conversations. In California, we have an End the Epidemics movement that's a part of our advocacy that focuses on HIV, sexually transmitted diseases, and hepatitis. And we do that because we know that those disease states are interlinked, and that there is synergy in our advocacy if we're able to make the case that the government should fund and increase the resources to all, because it's a sexual health, an HIV health, a hepatitis health wellness initiative that allows us to maximize our ability to advocate and to get resources. I think that kind of thing has been happening across the country. It's smart. It's a way for the HIV community to begin to acknowledge and use its expertise and experience to improve the status of a variety of other health-related conditions. But COVID-19, once again, I just want to make sure everybody's clear. The structures that we have fought to put into place at HRSA, through the Ryan White program and through the community based care programs in the Bureau of Primary Care, the programs that we put into place at the CDC, those are all the same people with the same infectious disease expertise who are now working to address the COVID pandemic. And so we are perfectly positioned to have maximum impact on ensuring that the people in our community get what they need when it is safe and proven to be effective. Our networks of community-based organizations, our public health relationships are the relationships that will leverage all of that. We will be the guides for the rest of our communities to ensure that what needs to be done is done in an appropriate way. We lead the public health and community-based advocacy communities in our experience in how to do that. And so, once again, thank goodness for the HIV advocacy community, because we have so much power and expertise and knowledge to share. And it's the perfect opportunity to share it. I saw David Miller talking about issues with Medicaid prior authorizations happening in various states. That's a terrible development. It's a development that has been in some ways promoted by the insurance industry. There are the payers don't want to pay for what it is we need, and so they try to restrict access. And so that's an issue that we have to fight with the insurance companies, and we also have to fight it with our public health officials who control the Medicaid programs at the state level. Remember, that's a state-based program. And so these are all things that we have to pay attention to.
So, Ernest, I love your response. I would like for the other speakers to also have a chance to answer the question.
I was certainly enjoying Ernest so much because, you know, those probably also would be similar to my priorities. But if I take it from being an advocate and noticing that we need more co-conspirators out in certain demographic populations to be taught how to advocate and to use their voice and to be empowered, we need more programs, even from an ASO, CBO, and all the way up, that's going to train us a little bit more how we can show up and be effective with our voice. I think another priority that I advocate for constantly when I think about social determinants of reality is that we need more diversity in our employment that actually represents the demographics that we're serving. And sometimes that's a barrier, particularly for the trans-identified community who is negotiating survival versus the qualifications that oftentimes is not needed. And I'm publicly saying that because I believe there are certain positions in public health that gets out into the community, don't need those rich qualifications that most agencies is putting forth. So that's minimizing the empowerment of demographics to actually apply to make your agency or institution more diverse, matching demographic population. In addition to that, if education or those skills are not there, then while we're being creative in our institutions of what more we could do to foster our communities, you know, education and having tools that will give skill buildings is always an important aspect I'll advocate for. And I think the final piece is more of a wish list. I always say that I think outside the box, even when I was in public health managing or thinking what else could be done that has not already been duplicated. And certainly the numbers was fudged that it was appropriate, but it really was not. Because not every initiative is deemed appropriate for each state, each region, each jurisdiction, depending on your demographics. But my wish list is that I know, and I'm going to be facetious when I say this, but as a Black trans woman who have a blush line, some lashes, who love makeup, I'm not interested in you getting me to the table with a $10 or $20 MAC gift card. What gets me to the table is the reality of my life. Perhaps you can get me to the table because you have advocated with HUD that there's a housing program that I now can get into. They have made some slots available for me to have a place in a secure, brave space that I can thrive and rest at night. Or the wish list would be that you partner with equality organizations right around the corner from your ASO or CBO that will hire someone in my intersectionality or perhaps living with HIV that would be able to be employed. Those are the type of things that I like to advocate for, that also becomes a wish list that I try to share in order to see a different way of how we are moving HIV in this movement. And what's next for us is to really look at how we are incentivizing when we're asking people to come to the table. Because I promise you, lipstick run out if you're using it as a lip gloss. And powder just don't cover up as much stuff when you're stressing about, you know, where your next meal is going to come from. So just being creative in a way where it's tangible and it's really going to look at the reality of the demographics that you're serving, and it's sustainable. There go that word. I knew it was coming. It's sustainable to our community and to our well-being. So we won't contract HIV, or we will take our medication and we will be linked and we'll show up at appointments, and we wouldn't have to prioritize if we had those co-conspirators as advocates that will partner with the priorities that our communities are looking for.
I mean, they said it all. I'm just going to come in and chime in, you know, maybe say it slightly a different way, but what they, you know, essentially this is a lot of what I see too. When I look at the fact that people who've mentored me, who I look up to, who I greatly admire, for whatever, you know, piece of paper they don't have or whatever, that I can walk in and go get a job that they are far more qualified for than I think that's ridiculous. You know, I think that there are gatekeepers within the HIV community, and sometimes unintentionally we can be one that need to step the freak back. I think that we need to use our privilege to, you know, for, you know, at the front end to make things better for everybody. Do you have people who are going, you know, do you have the ear of individuals who are going to listen to you or pay attention to you? Do you have influence? Share those perspectives and those ideas, you know, from the communities that they don't want to hear from. It will mean, sadly, it's you know, something that, you know, Karmarion can say that's very important, and lived experience might be respected more coming out of my mouth, and that's ridiculous. But if I can parrot those words so that I can then open the door, that's fine, because that's what we're all about here. It's togetherness. We need to share one another's stories, whether it's our lived experience or not, because we're together. We need to use our privilege for one another collectively. People also need to use their stories. I think there's a lot of sense of imposter syndrome and doubt and all of these things that happen. And I think that people don't realize how powerful, you know, what they've been through and what they know and what they've seen, how much expertise they possess. And then I think that we need to kind of work on, you know, I know that we're talking about skills building and development and change. I really feel like we need to build up, you know, ourselves, because there's, you know, it's variable in terms of what people know and can do and their access and their abilities. We especially need to support our youth, I think, you know, as well. And I think that we need to call out fake community engagement and fake community involvement, because it is out there. It is fake as hell. You know what I mean? I heard, I think it was Vanessa Johnson and Barb Cardell talking about the Eden Chicken community one time. I don't know, or it might've been Vanita, but whatever it was, we're talking about the fake involvement, the tokenism. That is not what we need. That is not real. Real, meaningful involvement of people living with HIV/AIDS, greater involvement means from the bottom up, from the budgeting, from the conception, from the planning, from the focus group. It means that not just the one part-time person that you hire because of this grant that's only going to have this job for 7 months. That's nonsense. Do you look like and understand the community that you're with? Is it sustainable? Is it real? Is it intersectional? Because if it's not, you might be the problem. It might be time for you to back away. You need to leave. And that's not in hatred. That's not in anything, but the demographics have changed, and we've got to change too. Change or go.
Awesome. So, I mean, I feel like we can at this point close the panel a couple minutes early. I want to echo Karmarion's comment about how we can't be bought out with a Mac gift card or Sephora or whatever else you like. I want to echo Miranda K's idea of how pieces of paper give us amounts of privilege that sometimes we don't deserve, or for that matter, hide mediocrity, leaving out people behind. And yeah, all of this is awesome. With that in mind, I will close out this panel, thanking all the panelists, Ernest, Miranda K, and Karmarion, for your time and for everything. And Drew just posted our policy take action page in case anyone's interested of other ways they can take action on behalf of AIDS United. With that, I will pass it on to Linda Blount's remarks, and we can turn on the PowerPoint again.
Well, thank you, Victoria. And no way did you make a fool of yourself. That's just not possible. I definitely want to add my thanks to AIDSWatch for being here. I was kind of laughing at you, Karmarion. I'm from a Presbyterian background. And
just a second, I'm sorry to interrupt. Ernest, can you turn off your camera now that the panel is gone? Okay, thank you.
But we don't want to see Ernest?
Well, I just want to make sure that the space is there for the interpreters.
Always want to see Ernest.
Picture.
I was just laughing. I'm from a Presbyterian background in a small town, and yeah, we just didn't do sort of bringing the message in a strong fashion. So I really enjoyed what you had to say. But I just want to sort of share some observations from what I heard today, and just sort of start with, you know, where Black people and people of color live. We live at the intersection of racism and homophobia and transphobia and poverty and certainly health disparities, and in and around an oppressive system that devalues us and excludes us. And add to that, we're at the crosshairs of a criminalization approach, system, way of being, where almost 2,000 people have been charged with crimes against us in the last 20 years, and in a system that's determined to punish us and keep the stigma alive. And now here we are with COVID-19. And Ernest, I really appreciate what you had to say, which could keep us away from our providers, away from prevention, away from the care that we deserve, simply because we don't want to take the risk of getting COVID-19. And all of this is against a backdrop of some progress. We have some medications have improved, but what that has caused to happen for some is that we don't have to talk about what's going on. Some of us have chosen not to talk about what it means to live with HIV, not to talk about the kinds of issues we face because we don't have to. But I think what we heard today is something very different. While that maybe has worked for some, it has not worked for all of us. And the systems that exist still work against us. The systems exist that remove the choices that we would all make to be as healthy as we could. The systems exist today that sort of disregard us, disregard our issues, to try to make us invisible. And it's really the systems that matter. It's the systems that frankly create the policies that ensure that we don't move forward. So I just want to share a couple of thoughts on what I heard today. Ernest started with the history, and brought us forward. And I really appreciate this idea, Ernest, of that this is a cautionary tale. We need to learn, and we can learn from this experience. We're seeing what is happening now that was happening similarly in 1981. We don't have to repeat these mistakes. We can learn from this. And I love what you talked about when you said, you know, it's for us not to minimize our story. You warned us, don't minimize our story, don't minimize our work. And it's really about love. It's the love that will cause the community to demand what it needs and get what it needs. And Karmarion, let me add my congratulations on your marriage. I too am enjoying grandchildren. It's really a cool experience. But I really liked what you said about how we define the movement depends on our perspective and our priorities, and that, in fact, perhaps this is an awakening moment. But you talked about how we all need to be included in this moment in order to move forward. I mean, certainly we know that Black women have been left out in many respects of this moment. And if we're not all moving forward, then that means somebody is being dragged. And that is not what we want. We all need to move forward. And I'm going to start using your term, the social determinants of reality, because that's really where we are. And the fact that you quoted Bruce Lee is very cool. If we know, we must apply. And if we're willing, we must do. That is the only way we're going to move forward. And Miranda, you know, you brought Audre Lorde into the conversation. Self-care is an act of political warfare, and we need to practice it early and often. The Black Women's Health Imperative was founded as a self-care organization 38 years ago. That was why Billy Avery brought us together, to take care of each other, but more importantly, to take care of ourselves. And so, you know, you talked about 2020 defying visual acuity. Absolutely. We have got to be very careful about the myopia of our response to not only COVID-19, but to ending the epidemic. We have to end it for everyone. And I just have to applaud you on your use of your scientific term, crap or get off the pot, because that is really where we are. There were so many wonderful, incredible ideas. Today, just in the last few minutes, this panel brought the heat and the truth, as we knew they would. And I just sort of want to leave us with, you know, a couple thoughts. You know, as the panelists said, we've got work to do. We've already done the work, but we've got more work to do, and we've got to do it together. You know, as Karmarion said, we cannot give up. And Miranda, I love the way you said, they're afraid of us. They're afraid of our power. Well, we've got to show them exactly what that power means by changing systems of care delivery, changing policies, exhibiting collective outrage, because that's what this movement and this moment requires right now. We've got to come together, us, our allies, and talk about what has to be done, what hasn't happened, and to show how it will happen. And I'll end with what Ernest said, the work must continue. We must keep the faith. And that means voting not only at the national level, but at the state level, the local level, down to your school board level. Voting absolutely matters. Thank you, Age United. We're joined with you to voice our collective outrage, to make sure that we all get the respect and the value, the dignity, the care that we deserve. And we deserve it all because we all did one thing today. We woke up. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. With that, we will wrap up. We're almost at the end of AIDSWatch Road to Resilience theme. I will give it to Carl to thank everybody, and yeah.
Good evening. My name is Carl Baloney. I'm Vice President for Policy and Advocacy at AIDS United. And I just want to thank everyone for your participation in AIDSWatch. I want to thank Miranda and Ernest and Karmarion for your participation on this last panel and for your words of wisdom. Also, Linda, thank you for this wrap up. It was wonderful. Thank you for everyone who's participated across the course of the past 2 days. I kind of have an old refrain that I go back to every year. about how important this event is for me. It's our opportunity as advocates in DC to really connect with folks across the country that really give this work meaning. So I just feel so blessed to really be here with all of you and to continue our advocacy throughout the year, following up 6 months from the last AIDS Watch. You know, from the bottom of my heart, it's so good to see everyone and hear from folks who participated in the session. I want to remind you all to continue to be engaged as we approach the November elections. In the, you know, the immortal words of Ronald Johnson, who spoke earlier in the AIDS Watch session, voting is HIV advocacy. So please make sure you get out and vote, bring your friends and family, make sure that they have a plan, and just make sure that your voices are heard, because that's what AIDSWatch is about. It's about uplifting the voices of people who are living with HIV, people who are impacted, and, you know, just make sure that we make it through and make it into 2021, being heard and having policies enacted that will help make us all healthier and help us all live our best lives, which is all we can hope to do. The next AIDS Watch, I hope there's a slide in front of y'all, I don't see it, but AIDS Watch is going to be coming up again in March. And it will be virtual again. Before we can come all together soon, we're going to stay safe and plan to join again March 22nd through 23rd in 2021. We're already going to get started on the work. A big thank you to our planning partners at the Treatment Access Expansion Project at Harvard and the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus, who will be again convening in partnership with AIDS United, AIDS Watch 2021. So stay tuned, mark your calendars, and we'll see you next time. Take care.